may not join us, so in the interim, let's get started. I'm Jack Weiss. Dennis Zine is present. This is the Public Safety Committee for Monday, April 20. If the other council members come, Mr. Zine, we can ask them to join in items that we send on approval-wise. So why don't we first do a consent calendar, Mr. Zine, although I'll tell people that if you're on the consent calendar, it still could be a good idea to stick around, because if you leave and then another colleague comes and then dissents from that, then we'll just end up with questions later on. So having said that, I would propose 7, 8, 9, and 10 to go on consent. Mr. Zine, I don't know if you agree with that?
That's fine.
All right, so we have 2 votes on those. We'll wait and see if we get a third vote. So if you wouldn't mind just sticking around, it's probably a good idea. We will hear the items 1 and 2, the DNA items together. Item 3, when Jeff Carr arrives, we'll do that. And then we'll do 4 and then 5 and 6. So why don't we do the first 2 items? Chief, good morning.
John White, City Clerk, Item 1, Police Department to present verbal report relative to the status of DNA testing, backlog, and cold hits, the handling of latent prints, and other related matters.
And call item 2, since...
And item 2, motion Weiss, Gurul, Garcetti, directing the Police Department to report relative to the implementation and promoting of the Department's sexual assault kit tracking system and victim notification program.
Good morning.
Morning, Chief.
Charlie Beck, Chief of Detectives. How is everybody this morning?
Very well.
Good, good. So, to bring you up to date, I know we talked 2 weeks ago, we stand at about 5,500 sexual assault kits in backlog. That is a reflection of the kit numbers. We have not transferred over to the case numbers yet. That's kind of part 2 about what we're going to talk about. Out of that backlog, all kits have been tested that involve stranger unsolved cases. We have prioritized the 900 plus unsolved other cases, and they are next to be tested. Actually, a large portion of them have been outsourced already. Our desire is that with the next 2 months, the only cases that we will have in the backlog are cleared cases that have either been cleared by an arrest and a conviction, or have been submitted to the district attorney and found wanting. After that, we will go through all of those cases and determine which ones of those cases would be best served by a DNA analysis, and then we'll test those next, and then we will follow on down the line till all kits are tested. So we're making progress on the down the path of testing the kits and testing them in priority. We have outsourced all backlog kits that over 10 years time period. We have also researched all those kits, made determinations which ones have extended statutes, and those have also been sent out. But at least we have a finite number on that now, which we've never had before. We are pushing forward to ensure that no kits ever again will hit statute. And right now we have no kits in our backlog that are within 6 months of either the 2-year or the 10-year statute. So we have a little bit of breathing space on that, and we're pushing forward. We're outsourcing between 100 and 200 kits a week. So we're doing well on that. If we meet our hiring goals in the next fiscal year, then I'm confident that our backlog will become a historical issue that we deal with, but will never again grow. So those are good things. Now, you asked about the database.
Just for the record, Mr. Parks has joined us. Continue, yeah, please, with items.
So you asked about the database. This of course is a key element to this program in order to ensure database never grows again. The backlog never grows again, and that we are able to accurately track and make victim notification when necessary. We are working right now. I am working with Robbery Homicide Division on making the selection of the means of notification and going through the 402 stranger cases that were in our backlog that may qualify for victim notification to determine which ones will require notification. So we're actively working that. That will be this will be a historic look. The database will capture all things in the future, but we will deal with the notification, our failures to notify in the past through this historic look. Generous donation from the 5th Council District, $25,000. We are looking at encumbering that money, and I don't have a database to spend it on yet, but I intend to. And we are meeting with our ITA and ITD folks on developing that, and the meetings are ongoing. So hopefully in the next, within the next month, I'll be able to give you more specifics and show you exactly what the database will look like. Right now, as you have seen in our past presentations, we have the instrument for entry and that kind of thing, but no instrument for query. So we'll work on those things. And that's the extent of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Chief. Does anyone have questions for Chief Beck?
The couple, Chief, the outsourcing the kits,
Yes, sir.
1 to 200 that they're outsourcing. Do we do competitive bidding on those, on the outsourcing with the different labs?
Well, there's only a few labs that meet the criteria. Bodie and Cellmark are the ones we use that we can that will meet our needs. There were bids put out, and that kind of predates me a little bit. So if you want a lot of information on that, I can get a vet up here to talk about that.
Are they in Maryland?
There is one in Maryland, and there's one in neither of them are in California.
Would you say Northern California?
No, neither of them are in California.
Neither in California.
Right.
Okay. I'm looking to see if there's anything in California that we could help some of our.
I would love to find something in California that could meet our needs, and we are continuously looking, because what's going to happen, council member, is that the county is looking at dropping a bunch of money into their backlog, which they have not been doing, and when that happens, then there's going to be a bidding issue between our two entities, and finding more capacity is going to be a key, because I think the county may take the tact of dumping a lump sum, which will put tremendous pressure on these outlets. Right now, to my knowledge, we're the largest outsourcer in the nation. So right now we have a lot of ability to deal with the labs because of that. But that is not going to be true forever, because a lot of people are feeling the same pressures that this body did and that I have, and are having to deal with this problem. And we certainly are not the only major city with a backlog. Matter of fact, I think that most people don't even know what they have.
And on the
So I can, what I'll do is I'll direct my folks to look and see who could possibly meet our needs in California, and then we can either, I'll include it in my next report. How's that?
because what I'm looking at is to some established in the city of Los Angeles,
Well, I would love that.
where that could help the job market, help the local economy, and since those cases are generating from here, and they're making $1,000+ per test in another part of the country, it doesn't help our economy.
The issue there is
a test anyway. Why couldn't we do them here?
the issue there is, of course, is that because the same people, the same degrees and expertise is required in the private lab as in my lab, then we may be robbing Peter to pay Paul there, because as you know, I'm going to try to hire a significant number of criminalists next year, and my point is that in some of these outlying areas, it's easier for people to establish a lab and find people that live in that neighborhood that are criminalists that would be able to work it. Where in our environment, there are lots of jobs for criminalists in the greater metropolitan area. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm just telling you there's a.
But since we're outsourcing so many, and not only us but and I understand some jurisdictions have really cut back on the testing because of the cost incurred.
Sure, and of course, our goal as we do the hiring, which it kind of meets your need here, is in hiring from the local job market. Our goal in hiring next year is to eventually eliminate the need to outsource. I mean, we're outsourcing out of desperation because we don't have the criminals that we need. But as we hire, we'll keep it in house, and this outsourcing need should diminish, incrementally as we move forward, and eventually be eliminated. And we'll just do it all in house, which meets your wish.
Yeah. And then the other question is, the combined lab that we have, Cal State LA, is that working to expectations?
Yes. Cal State LA is a great facility. We hire a lot of our criminalists and our technicians from Cal State LA. That is a really well thought out partnership that fits the needs of the area. I will say that eventually we will have to look at how the whole structure is. And I invite anybody obviously on this committee, and I think all of you have been, to go to the lab and see how it works. But the lab is literally split down the middle. There's a blue side and a green side, and that's the way it is, and that works fine. But eventually, the region, not just the council, should look at that and see if there's any economies that could be realized, especially as we move forward and find other ways or explore other avenues of testing DNA and other forensics, so that we can, the way we're doing it now is not the way it is always going to be, is what I'm saying. So we just have to look forward, and that's not something that needs to be done right away, because both our labs, the sheriff's side and my side, are dealing with these huge backlog issues right now. But when that starts to be resolved, then we should look at what economies of scale could be realized, because that was one of the intents of the original thought process.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any questions?
Let me just ask if you can clarify one thing, and I may have missed this when you gave the presentation at council. What's the backlog on rape cases and then the backlog on non-rape cases, or all other cases?
Well, there's the backlog on rape kit. Now I can break it into, I can either tell you kits or cases, because as you well know, they're not the same.
Yeah, but do me a favor and break it down and then explain what the difference is.
As we sit, the backlog in kits is right at 5,500. The backlog in cases is about 700 less than that. The difference is that there may be multiple kits per case. Sometimes multiple kits are established because there are kits taken from suspects. Sometimes multiple kits are established because the hospital provides the employee with multiple kits that may or may not contain the core elements of a rape kit. In other words, sometimes we get urine samples in the kits because the officer, as you well know, gets a sealed. He's told, here's your sexual assault kits, he or she, and they take them and they book them. And until they're opened by the lab, nobody knows what's in them. We're assuming that it's the pieces for the sexual assault kit, but anyway. So sometimes there's many other things in there besides that. So that is the difference.
Now, what about non-rape cases? What's the backlog on DNA on those?
For DNA, now, for non-rape cases, I cannot tell you what my DNA backlog is. I'll give you that next week. I didn't come prepared to discuss that, my current backlog. I can tell you
more than what you're saying for rape.
Untested, yeah, untested. Oh yeah.
Okay.
But especially, Councilman, if you include such things as touch DNA from property crimes, this kind of thing. I mean, we have over 55,000 items of evidence in cold storage. Now, that does not necessarily mean that they're all untested, but that's how many there are. So this is as you're getting to, this is going to be the next problem after this one.
If you could, and I guess have this weekly, if you could give me some idea on what is the breakdown property versus crimes against person in that capacity as to what, and it doesn't have to be exact, just to give an idea of what.
I can do that. Now that'll be predicated on the detective's request for testing, which is different than we do the sexual assault kits, as you well know. So I can do that for you.
And I'm interested in things like homicides. I mean, do we have a slew of homicides that are untested?
We push those. I push those through very hard. One of the advantages, I hope, of the labs working under chief of detectives is that when we have homicide issues, when we have priority case issues, then our robbery homicide division is the direct liaison to SID to ensure that those needs are met, not just on robbery homicide cases, but on all homicide cases. We have every week I have a homicide briefing where all the week's past homicides are gone over by the case carrying detective. SID attends those. These are some of the ways that we try to keep everybody involved and on the same level, so that the things you're talking about get answered.
The other thing on the system that, on item 2 that you talked about,
Yes.
is that going to track anything other than rape cases?
It will not. We're going to design it specifically for this universe. There are new property management systems coming online that should reflect the other things. The reason that I want to design a standalone for the rape cases is the sexual assault kits is because A, it's such a huge item of interest. We've had traditionally a large difficulty tracking them, and then C, there's a notification requirement if they pass statute, and we need to get our arms around that, and really no agency that I've looked at has done that. So we need a standalone system because of the standalone requirement. I mean, in a perfect world, would one property management system do all this? Yes, but I really don't have that time for that. We have to get this piece done, and so a standalone system will be.
When you mentioned earlier on the rape cases, are they the only crime that has the expiration date in the sense of statute if you don't analyze them, or does that carry over to other cases?
Well, other cases have statute dates, and they don't toll the same way that the rape cases do, but all other cases have statute dates. Obviously, the exceptions, homicide and several others, but there is the sexual assault cases have a extra buffer built in on their statute date with the testing.
So rape is the only one that has a tolling mechanism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we will approve I guess that these are note and files? It's the motion and note and
You
file?
can either note and file, receive and file the motion. You may as well report
We'll
today.
note and file everything, because I think they were both for reports. Once again, the progress you're making is extraordinary, and I know you've got a lot of people working hard with you, but thank you for the direction you're giving the process, Chief.
Well, and I thank you for this. Obviously, this committee is key in this, and without this committee's direction, we may not have achieved the success that you're extolling there.
Well, it's welcome news, and we look forward to fighting for you in the budget as well.
Yeah. And I will vastly appreciate that.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Parks, before you got here, Mr. Zine and I agreed to move items 7, 8, and 9, 10 on consent. If you could join in that, then we would have a majority of the committee.
But see, I could join it too. I had some questions on 7, 8, and 9.
7, 8, and 9, you've got questions? Okay, so you can join on 10.
Yeah.
All right, so 10, we've moved along with 3 votes. If you're here on 7, 8, 9, I told you should stick around. I was right. Thanks for sticking around. Okay, next item, please, Mr. White.
Item 3, Mayor's Office and Police Department to report relative to the city's upcoming gun buyback program event.
Reverend Jeff Carr, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Councilman Weiss and Zine and Councilman Parks. Just wanted to give you a brief update on a gun buyback.
Your name?
I'm sorry, Reverend Jeff Carr from the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development.
Charlie Beck, same place.
From the Mayor's Office, or?
Same place as last time.
We'd just like to give you an update on an upcoming gun buyback that's part of our 2009 gang initiatives that Chief Bratton and the Mayor announced in late January. On May 9th, on Mother's Day weekend, we're going to be holding the first gun buyback I believe we've had either in a long time or maybe ever in the city of Los Angeles on that Saturday. And we're really working to try and get more guns off the street. Well, we think which everyone agrees is a good thing. Also get them out of the hands of gun owners who may have had them stored in their garages or in their house someplace and they're not using them, and people who are looking for a way to get rid of those. So when we have burglaries and people steal guns and then suddenly those inactive guns become active. We've been working with really to promote this on a two-pronged approach. One is through the established media, and we were very fortunate we were able to get KCAL 9 and KCBS 2 to become our media partner. They had a press conference with us 2 weeks ago that they had carried live. They've been promoting this on their website, as well as anytime they do a story related to guns or gun violence. And they're going to be doing approximately 5 news stories, in-depth news stories between now and May 9th to really try and promote this event and help us to educate the public about the dangers associated with guns and gang violence. We've so far gotten Ralph's has been to step up to the table and given us $50,000 towards the purchase of the gift cards. We're using some funds from a small grant in Boyle Heights to subsidize that. We are still soliciting funds, so if any of you are interested in supporting this financially or know of individuals who might, we're a little concerned that we want to make sure we have enough gift cards for everyone who actually comes. The only basis upon which we have to know sort of what the range of the numbers of guns that might come in is what the Sheriff's Department has done. You may have seen last Christmas over a 5-day period, the Sheriff's Department in Compton did an annual one they've done for 6 years. It got over 1,000 guns, which was a record for them.
This weekend was Hawaiian Gardens?
This weekend they did Hawaiian Gardens on just one Saturday, which is probably close to what our event would be. They got over 350 this weekend. We're offering a $100 gift card for a handgun and $200 for an assault weapon. And we've also engaged a lot of our community-based organizations, in particular gang intervention groups, to actually help us do a grassroots outreach campaign as well as a sort of the media campaign. And so we're actually producing about 60,000 of the 4x4 kind of glossy party flyers that young people use, and we're going to be distributing those throughout the city of Los Angeles. We have 20 locations within the city that LAPD will be handling all of the actual locations and actually the confiscating of the weapons and then using and taking those and disposing of them. And so Chief Beck and the department have been a great partner on this. We're using locations that are not obviously the police department at the local station, because we want to encourage folks who might feel uncomfortable coming to a situation like that to come bring those guns as well. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing. Chief Beck, if you want to add anything.
You know, we had initially intended, well, when Jeff and I were initially talking about this, we had intended on just having regional centers to do this, but there was such enthusiasm at the divisional level, at the grassroots root level, that we end up having the 20 locations that Jeff talked about. So there's a lot of excitement. We're working with the Sheriff's Department, using the same protocols that they used to keep it consistent so that people don't get confused. You know, if anybody asks the council offices, you know, we have a hotline number that people can call to get information about the buyback, where there's brochures and flyers that have been widely distributed to talk about the details. But the main thing is, please, in the trunk, unloaded, the officers will come up to the car, they'll retrieve it for you. Obviously, this is not what's going to happen in every instance, but that's the way we prefer to do it. So.
And you should have actually a flyer as well as a frequently asked questions that gives you a little bit more information. And we hope that, you know, again, we're trying this out. We'll see the results of this. If it works, we hope to do this later this year around the holidays and hopefully turn this into an annual event within the city of Los Angeles.
And what kind of pre-publicity are KCAL and Channel 2 going to give you?
Well, they've already done a couple stories. They covered the news conference live, and then actually replayed that. You know, they have actually more hours of news. They have 11 hours a day of news, and so actually for local news, they have the biggest volume of local news, and so they're continuing to air stories and promote this both in their regular news shows as well as they've been promoting this on their website for the last month. We think will give us significant media coverage that, for example, the sheriff hasn't done, but I think more importantly is the grassroots effort. And actually, I should say, this actually was the idea of one of our gang intervention workers, actually in response to seeing the sheriffs and sort of the word on the street of how people were responding, partly because of the toughness of the economy. It was actually his idea. He called me in December, and we started brainstorming about how to do this, and this really is a result of his idea. So I think that grassroots effort that we're going to make is going to help as well.
I think it's really impressive. And I mean, I always, I used to believe that these programs were not good ideas, and I've thought about it a lot and listened to a lot of people, and it really does seem to me that they are a good idea, because these are precisely the sort of weapons that get stolen or that get handed off to somebody else, or they get misplaced, or these are precise sort of weapons that are going to end up being used in crimes. You may not get, in fact, my feeling is you're unlikely to get a deluge of guns from gang members, but you're going to get guns that could easily be in the hands of gang members, that could easily be, used on purpose or inadvertently in a home. I also think that there is there's a suicide prevention element to this that is a challenging thing probably to publicize and get the word out about. I mean, that's a difficult message to sort of figure out how to encapsulate it, but I think you're going to do great stuff. Even if I see a typo and a prominent verb in this flyer, I'll try not to mention it on the record.
Sorry.
In terms of like rocking my world, there's nothing worse. Any questions on this guy? I can barely handle it.
On the issue of communication out to the group, where do you find the vast majority of people turning the guns in?
The sheriff's department.
Bruce Reardon see the typo? Does Bruce Reardon see the typo?
No, we're not going to show it to. We're not going to show it to them now.
It'll drive you nuts, Mr. No, it'll drive you nuts, Mr. Reardon.
The sheriff's department didn't have any data in terms of the kinds of people. I mean, part of this is to not track people and to make it anonymous and give people the opportunity to just turn in their guns, no questions asked. I think I would say they would share, sort of Councilman Weiss's experience that it's not, we've not had. Hundreds of gang members or people that they would assume might be gang members walk in and turn in their guns. I think what we've tried to do, though, is we've also, Chief Beck and I have talked with some of our gang intervention workers that, hey, you know what, the folks who own the guns don't have to actually bring them in. I mean, if we've encouraged them to go out, talk to people, if they're willing to give up their guns to them, put that in their trunk, they bring it to the gun buyback, we're okay with that as well. Anything we can do to get the guns out of the hands of folks who might have them has been our goal. So there's really no data that I know of with the Sheriff's Department as to the makeup, the demographics of the people that turn these in.
I'm just figuring how you target to get the message out, because if you don't watch Channel 2 or 9, and whatever other kind of coverage there's given to the mass audience, whether it be a talk radio station, a music radio station, to let more folks know. And that's why I was asking the demographics to target whatever groups would be more responsive to turn them in.
Well, I think what we have done is we printed 5,000 poster-sized flyers. You'll see some of them in City Hall. We've actually distributed those throughout the city to different groups to get them to go to the local rec and parks facilities, the community-based organizations, grocery stores, liquor stores, to just saturate areas to get people out that way. That's one way. Then secondly, we've produced these 50 to 60,000 what I would call party flyers, these four-color glossy flyers that young people are familiar exchanging with about what's happening at a rave or different parties that they're throwing, stuff like that. So we've distributed them through that way. And then it was, I think Chief Beck can attest to this, when we had our last meeting, we really expanded the invitations, and there was about probably 100 people in this room. You probably had 60 to 70 ex-gang members who were there in this meeting to talk about how we could really get the word out to the right folks. And so we're really trying to do it from, both at the citywide and the media, kind of established media level, and then actually trying to do it more on the grassroots level as well. So we'll see. We haven't done this before, so all of this to some degree is an
Nate Holden
experiment.
did this a number of years ago.
Okay.
I remember
Yes.
Nate Holden did a gun buyback a number of years ago, and there was some success to that. It's when we had a series of shootings, and all of a sudden he's out there buying guns. So that was the only time I can remember that was ever done in the city of LA. It's a great program. The other question I have is, you said 50,000 from Ralph's, and it says on here in very, very small print, while supplies last. So what happens when the 50,000 is gone and you got a whole bunch of people that want to turn in guns?
Well, we're actually,
What?
we have another $10,000 from another source, and then we're in conversation with some other folks. We haven't finalized commitments from other folks. Our goal initially was to have $100,000 to be able to give away. That's still our target, and I think when we're actively fundraising between now and May 9th, but we would certainly be open to any contacts or contributions or folks that you think might be interested in supporting this, even at $5,000 or $10,000
I see the
level.
Protective League is here. Maybe the Protective League wants to join in with the reward. The Protective League.
We certainly love their support.
They're ignoring,
Councilman
obviously, they're not too concerned. They're protective, they're looking for money to help on the gun buyback program, looking for support for that. I'm sure UFLAC would help support, maybe the Protective League would help support. What do you think about that? Hey, help save people's lives and turn in guns and, all right, it's a good idea. We'll follow up. I'll follow up with the Protect League and UFLAC. I think they would be generous in providing some funds for that.
That would be great.
I'll twist Peter's arm as soon as we
Twist
get out
his
of it.
arm, and, yeah, that's good.
Both.
I mean, the more, if you have $100,000, it gives you, greater potential.
That's
Say
exactly right.
$100,000 versus 50.
Right.
Mr. Parks? Yeah. Let me just ask a couple of questions. Having watched these things over time, there's always a little inconsistency. And one of them, it appears to me anyway, inconsistency. If we're telling people we'll check the gun and give it back to those who may have lost it through theft or lost and put them back on the street. But then on the other page, we say we'll keep everything anonymous and we won't run ballistics, which might give you a chance to solve a crime. And I'm just wondering how that meshes.
One of the reasons that we want to do this is we were impressed with the sheriff's success. They had some very in Lenox and other places, and these are the rules that they abide by. So we wanted to keep continuity. Now, that's not the only reason to do it, of course, but it is a fairly good reason. The other reason is that in the past, when we've done these and there was no anonymity attached, the success was fairly limited, and you did get a few house guns and relics and things like that. But the chances of getting the guns that we want to target were slim. Now, as far as running the guns for stolen property, we think that's our obligation. And if a few of them are stolen, and it will only be a few, that's what the sheriff's experience has been, then we will fulfill our obligation as to returning them. Now, that shouldn't be the majority of them, and we'll take those, and there'll be no questions asked. The anonymity is tough. I mean, and the not running ballistics and not filming the participants and all that thing. I mean, these are things that we struggle with. But in order to make the program succeed, I think that they have to be center to the philosophy. So that's the approach that we're taking. I mean, you're right. But the other piece is that if we did get a ballistics match and it is an anonymous turn-in, then all we know is what gun did it. And guns are easily disposed of via the ocean, via the desert. So, just knowing that we have the gun in custody without anything else is of minimal value. So,
well, let me just say one of the things, and I think in the years past, some of these have been successful and gotten around the anonymous issue if an outside group buys the gun. Because when you get a gun, you do have the registration, you can actually go back to the manufacturer, you got all kind of things you can look at with a gun. And it just, again, if you're going to give them back to those who lost or stole them, but ignore the potential of solving a crime, to me, appears to be inconsistent. And the fact that law enforcement is involved in the program and collecting, it just appears that one of the things that we do is solve crimes. And so I just throw that out.
and I understand that, Councilman, and it is important to us to solve crimes. We think that the amount of crimes that we would solve via an anonymous gun turn-in program and is very minimal. And now we may find that there may be a connection to gun suppliers, or maybe a connection to some other things, but given the benefit of getting unwanted guns off the street, or the huge benefit of getting the potential of what Reverend Carr is doing, of reaching out to gang members and then getting them to turn in their guns, active shooter guns, I think it outweighs the other benefit. And we struggle with that. It's not something that went unthought about. It's just that this is the way we want to do it this time. We've seen good success when it's run this way. If we find it doesn't work, then we'll modify it for the next time. But right now, we think this has some possibility of success. I just don't want to run out of money, like the councilman said. So I have your cell phone, sir. So if we run out, you'll be my first call.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the report and for the honesty with which you're dealing with these issues. And the bottom line is that each of these guns that you take off the street, we know to a moral certainty will never be used in a crime or in a horrible accidental way in the future, and so that's your principal goal. If there were a way to do that and solve crimes, then, God bless you, but I think you're looking prospectively and trying to prevent harm to people. That's why you're doing it. So,
Indeed.
so we congratulate you on that, and I know everyone on the council is going to want to be supportive of your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Mr. White,
Item 4.
please.
Item 4, Board of Police Commissioners, City Administrative Officer, and CLA reports relative to an application for an authorization to accept a grant award in the amount of $150,000 from the State of California Office of Emergency Services for the 2009 Law Enforcement Specialized Units Program and related actions.
So peace has broken out, right?
Correct. Good morning, Jason Clean, Office of the CAO. In our original report, my office recommended against accepting the 2009 LESSA grant on the basis that the general fund monies to administer the program exceeded the grant-funded monies. We've worked with the CLA and the LAPD to put together a modified budget that is both cost-neutral and does not add any net positions to the department. We've gone ahead and agreed with the department that we will utilize 2 existing police officer 2 positions and reallocate those positions to a detective 2 and a detective 3 position, and we will hold the P2 positions vacant, which causes no net hiring to the department and allows us to go over the grants audit at the end of the operating budget and analyze whether or not the service impact of actually running this program exceeds the service impact of actually having the police officer 2s in the field.
Thank you for doing that. Chief?
Good morning, Deputy Chief Mike Moore with Operations Valley Bureau of LAPD and the bureau in which this effort will be housed, the Van Nuys Station, in its initial presentation. And I'm also joined by
Detective Angela Grant from Detective Bureau, and I'm the Department Domestic Violence Coordinator.
Councilman, and our appearance here today is really as an effort to answer any questions or to be responsive as you desire as to the description of the importance of this grant and how we see its application, as well as recognizing the concern regarding the maintenance of cost neutrality on this and ensuring you that the resources that's presented here, as far as the methodology, it's evolved over the last year. And that evolution is, frankly, in response to making every effort to minimize costs to the city, while at the same time having an opportunity to evaluate what we believe is a very important concept, that being a family violence justice center model, a multidisciplinary team of law enforcement, prosecutors, victims, advocates, counseling services. It's something that we've seen used successfully in other cities across the country. It has not been tried in LAPD, and this is an effort that is being provided for by this grant to try this. It does involve the realignment of 2 police officer positions from my existing resources in the Valley. However, I think that in looking at what is offered here as far as an improvement of services to the underserved, recognizing the community in which this is targeted has substantial language barriers, transportation concerns, their unfamiliarity with the laws and protections that are afforded. We think that this model of spending a couple years looking at it and efforting to see, can we improve our services to victims? Can we reduce the cycle of violence, the generational aspect of domestic violence, and also, frankly, improve the outcomes on the victims suspects involved. So in summary, again, we'll be happy to answer any questions, but I believe this is our best effort to strike a minimal cost while maximizing the opportunity of a specialized unit grant program by the state of California, and to really leverage those monies effectively.
Thank you for that. And, last week we had the situation of the CLA and the CAO not agreeing, and this week, after having had the time for you all to sit down, the CAO is coming forward with this report, which has changed, and we all appreciate that. I know Mr. Cardenas appreciates it. This is an issue he cares a great deal about. I saw him over the weekend, and I see this letter from him today. So I'm hoping we can move this forward now that everybody agrees. Are there questions, colleagues, on the item?
I have the same concerns as we had last week, because although there were some questions answered by the CAO, or for the CAO, in effect, we're still using the cost of 4 bodies in the department's budget to acquire a $150,000 grant. And I think in dealing with that, this is exactly the kind of issue we've talked about in budget and finance, where we get into these grants and begin to move forward on them, and then we're upgrading people, which is outside of the budgetary process. And again, those 4 bodies are worth, what was it, 1-point-something million over 3 years for a grant of $150 per year. And so we're still using the same logic, and it's beyond, and I think it's somewhat, when we look at our budget policies, this is exactly what we've tried to restrain in several departments. So I think it's got the same concerns that we're using 3 or 4 times the amount of resources to get a $150,000 grant.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If I might respond, Councilman, the use of the monies, those are existing resources that, as we've made an effort to explain, we're using detectives today investigating these cases. The 2 individuals that would be upgraded, the cost of those upgrades are wholly provided for by the grant. The increased services as to their ability to provide supervision, to optimize our look at this program, I believe is going to allow the department and the community to really look and see, is this a model that should be replicated? And the assurance I'll provide you is that the upgrade monies through this grant, in the absence of those, the department does not have the resources and cannot provide those that supervision. And that's critical, because this is an effort that is pulling these teams together in an off-site location and in mixing these various disciplines. I believe it's critical that we ensure that we have a focus on this program, and that it is pursuing the objectives as defined here, and then just again, that dependency though is being provided for by the grant.
No, I don't disagree with your logic. I just said financially, it's something that the budget committee has looked at, because we have so many of these grants go beyond the scope of the grant, and then generally what happens when the grant runs out, we then want to maintain the continued work relationship, and we've never budgeted for it. And if I understand the proposal, we have D1s that are working currently with domestic violence that will be moved to off-site. So whatever workload they were dealing with at their site, someone else assumes at least a portion of it, they go somewhere else. Then we take 2 P2s, and we take the financial part of it and upgrade people to D2s and D3s to move them off-site. And so that's what I'm looking at, is just the financial.
And if I might respond, the movement of those personnel, they're taking existing workload. Mm-hmm. So the instances of domestic violence, some 1,200 plus a year in Van Nuys area, is ongoing work, and it's work that they will take with them. They will take their entire workload with them. We, as we looked at this, even in its initial proposition, I see it as you do, it's $150,000 if we're spending millions for it. This is not an effort to prime or justify the use of those ongoing resources. Ongoing resources will continue. The $150,000 will hopefully, we believe, on an annualized basis, amplify our existing efforts, our existing relationships with the other partners that are already working with domestic violence victims and suspects. I believe that, again, the concept of research and review of best practices does involve risk. It does involve us exploring areas and piloting them. And while the larger practices at times of us as a department or other city departments continuing these matters after these grants subside, I will, again, in my presence here today from the Valley, there is, as I've told these other providers on the table, in the absence of this grant, we don't have resources to provide for these upgrades. And in the absence of this grant, in the absence of us budgeting it in the future, there'll be no mechanism to continue these supervisory positions. The way this is formulated somewhat ensures that in the absence of funding, they go away, and that is through the council resolutions.
Let me ask you two questions. Is the intent going for 1 year or 3 years?
This is a renewable grant, and it's my understanding that the term of it is estimated to be 3 years.
It's 1 year with the potential for 3 years.
And then has there been a consideration on the deployment of the D2, D1s and P2 concept as opposed to the upgrades? Was that considered?
The aspect of sacrificing 2 P2s now and upgrading those funded by the grant strikes a sweet spot of balance versus taking 4 positions and taking those as P2 authorities. We're taking the D1 authorities. This is getting a little technical, but we're taking the D1 authorities that are existing, that are currently doing the work. What we're leveraging with P2s are the supervision of that work and paying for that supervision by this grant. And so the reality of this is that the match point on this is only $50,000, and we're actually giving existing resources at a substantially higher rate. But we're also accomplishing a lot more. What has been done in Anaheim, for instance, Van Nuys area alone will easily surpass. The idea here is we're going to squeeze this that if possible I can extend up an emission area and get a larger impact with this unit on a domestic violence, on victims and on the people that are out there preying upon them in family violence.
Mr. Zine?
It's fine with me. I support it.
Okay, so I would like to support it. Mr. Zine would like to support it. Mr. Parks?
No, I'm not going to support it because it's contrary to what we've been doing on budget.
All right, so we'll send it on with a 2-to-1 vote. Mr. White, I'm not sure where it goes next.
It's on the council.
Okay. We'll see you in council. Appreciate that you all worked so hard to put something together that at least all of you are on the same page at.
If you could, Mr. White, please make sure that Chief Moore is notified when it goes to council. He may want to appear
Yes, I will be.
and comment before the council.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. All right. Let's call items 5 and 6 together, please, Mr. White.
Items 5 and 6, City Attorney Report and Ordinance amending the LAMC to hold the parent guardian of a minor graffiti offender liable for the recovery of costs for graffiti abatement pursuant to motion of Parks Garcetti. And item 6, Department of Public Works to report relative to establishing a program to hold accountable the parents of minors involved with graffiti vandalism, including administrative hearing process, and CO to report relative to the budget resources needed to implement such a program pursuant to motion Zine Smith.
Good morning. May I get started? Thank you. And I'll try and be as brief as possible, obviously saving room for questions from the committee if there are any questions. My name is Bruce Reardon. I direct the anti-gang operations for the City Attorney of Los Angeles. With me at council table, I still call it council table, is Travis Austin. Thank you, sir. Is Travis Austin, the Deputy City Attorney, who together with Deputy City Attorney Jody Galvin, who's also in the audience today, have been the laboring oars on putting together an ordinance as per the instruction, and we thank this committee as per the instruction Councilmember Zine, Councilmember Parks, and Councilmember Weiss as the chairman of this committee. Just to give some background, I know that the record, it helps the record for the public. Both Councilmember Zine and Councilmember Parks have looked comprehensively at the idea of upgrading and approaching graffiti from a different perspective with a new ordinance, and taking that idea of yours and hopefully running with it in a way that you find useful. The City Attorney of Los Angeles has tried to create a comprehensive ordinance that establishes, and if I may just read 2 paragraphs from my notes, I think it will be the most helpful. I hope it'll be as helpful as I believe it will be. That establishes 4 cost recovery strategies available to the city and provides the city with a flexibility to tailor appropriate sanctions to particular graffiti offenses, which can range from prison sentences to community service and parenting classes where appropriate. Because it's, as I've learned from the last couple of years in consultation with Council Members Weiss, Zine, Parks, and others, but the 3 of you have had a particular interest in this subject, all graffiti is not equal. it is all vandalism. It is all a crime, but there is graffiti that is gang graffiti, for example, on Main Street down in the 77th Division, or Broadway, where you have Florencia 13 graffiti. That's one type of graffiti. Then we have taggers, we have wall bangers. It's all a crime, it's all vandalism, but what we hope to do with this ordinance is create a flexible mechanism whereby the city can respond to different graffiti in the appropriate way, whether it's a jail sentence for those persons who the judgment of the LAPD and the prosecutor and ultimately the court is that that's appropriate, whether it's parenting classes or alternate sentencing for those persons who can be diverted in a healthier manner. A carrot and a stick, if you will, where obviously the carrot is the much healthier of the two alternatives. And then one additional thing, if I may. I know that you're all well aware of this, but as Councilmember Parks pointed out, it's often very helpful for the record to be clear. The City of Los Angeles, it's our estimate, and these are best estimates based on consultations with LAPD and sheriffs. The City of Los Angeles spends approximately $7 million a year cleaning up approximately 31 million square feet of graffiti at approximately 650,000 locations. The City of LA relies, before this ordinance, before your idea to pursue an ordinance like this, the City of LA relied exclusively on criminal restitution for reimbursement of these costs. And that was bringing in approximately $50,000 a year. So there's a huge gap. As soon as you brought it to our attention, the gap was even larger than we expected it to be. We hope that over the last couple of years, this is one more example of working together with the city family. And that's the council, the mayor's office, the LAPD, and our office, as well as all the different divisions and departments. For instance, the Office of Community Beautification in this instance, Public Works. We can work together to try and raise some revenue through the imposition of administrative fines where appropriate. We can do that with existing resources. I want that to be perfectly clear, that our sense is this can be done, as the county, we believe, are also doing this with existing resources. And by the way, we, particularly Ms. Galvin, is in constant contact with the county council, Cherie Steele, and we're watching how they're doing their ordinance. We think we're doing something that's even more useful, but of course that's a healthy competition towards the same goal. The point is, we're looking for ways to raise revenue, use existing resources and raise revenue. But we don't expect there to be a flood of monies in the first 180 days or even a year, but we hope, working with the council and the rest of the city family, to put in a mechanism and a framework that we can use for the years to come. And over time, if done appropriately, close that gap, that $50,000 to $7 million gap, bring in some revenue for the city that can be used to create a technology database, or use however the city council and the city family determines can be used to stamp out graffiti as best we can. And Mr. Austin can answer any specific questions about the ordinance far better than I, and I hope that was helpful.
Questions?
Yeah, let me start off with a couple of things. One, and I appreciate all the work you've done in the, particularly the letter that accompanied this lays out a great number of things that are concerned about. There was two areas that I was concerned about, or three really, in the ordinance. One we mentioned parenting classes. Now, if we go and look at what's before us on the county program, they have a very extensive intervention, prevention type program, and we kind of put it into one word, parenting. It just appears that, and I don't know whether it's part of the administrative appeal process or what, but it just seems like that's the part that needs to be expanded on, so that there is I think the ordinance can go forward as it is, but I think a portion that we need to come back on is how do we expand the word parenting into this prevention intervention program that gets kids into something other than just going back up. Parents pay the money and they may or may not do public service, but yet we lose a part of the prevention intervention. So that's one piece of it.
Yes, sir.
The other one was, in the last paragraph of my motion, we'd asked that the city part of it, we look for one-stop shopping for graffiti, so that we're not, because it's so confusing, if it's on Park and Rec property, so-and-so does it, if it's general services, so-and-so does it, then if you go to Clean and Green, somebody else does it. And it seems, particularly in light of the budget and other things, that if we had a one-stop location for the city of LA that got rid of graffiti, I'm just suspicious sometimes when we see, like Rec and Park says, they don't do it to our standards. The dilemma is, they may not, but if you don't do it at all, it's not meeting anyone's standards. So we need to see how that piece of it is a part of getting building and public works and people to come forward and tackle that problem. We discussed it, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row, and we have individual departments continuing to cut out their concerns, and we never get to a one-stop shop. And then the last item was dealing with the, let's see, when we have eventually funds that come to us for fines or whatever, I didn't see whether we expanded the use of the funds beyond the graffiti program, but whether those funds could eventually be used in the area of our helping fund our removal efforts. We have other things in there. I'm just wondering, I don't know if we'll ever get to that level of fines, but it just seems like we would be remiss if we didn't have that as an option, that we'd stick it in there, and if money ever elevated to that, we'd have that level of funding for with the rewards. You can help fund some of the graffiti removal and all the other things that you placed in there. That was the one piece of the fine that I thought we missed in expanding it, that we should have something that deals with removal, or some ability to fund the removal.
Well, thank you, sir. This is the beauty of this process, is it allows you to amplify and then amplify your considerable experience in this area and help us direct. And this did take time, and over the last 6 months to a year, there's been, as you say, you pointed out, budget issues, but also we've seen an increasing, just in the last couple of weeks even, an increasing sense or message that we're getting from the prison and jail system that alternative sentencing, particularly for the misdemeanors, is encouraged. And this is encouraged by the most pro-law enforcement person, like the Public Safety Committee, Sheriff Baca, the chiefs of police in the state. They're encouraging us to do just what you've described, which is in areas involving serious crimes. That's why we put all the time into this. This is why Mr. Austin and Ms. Galvin put all the time into this. This crime is a serious crime. However, we're being told by the jail and prison systems that they cannot keep all the misdemeanor violators in those systems, and we need to create systems where we can monitor and hopefully redirect those people. I think we can take those ideas.
The only one I would ask that we could maybe amend this ordinance is to stick in the phrase when we talk about the funding, when we get back to fines, that we include in the type of things we fund or our removal issues. The other two, I think, could be dealt with on a report back.
Yes.
The parenting expansion and the issue of merging all of our processes into one. Those are the report, but I just think we can add that one phrase in there where we talk about how we can, what are the funds used for graffiti removal should be a part of that.
Thank you, sir. And assuming leaving it to the rest of the committee, but I believe if that is the sense of the whole committee, we can do, and removal is very important to every council district, but we can definitely do that.
On a motion that introduced on the 15th with Councilmember Weezer, calls for to create the fund and called the Graffiti Abatement Community Beautification Trust Fund, and within that, criminal restitution, civil action, administrative order, nuisance abatement lien. And on the motion of the 15th that went into council, I think some of the questions from Councilmember Parks may be answered in that follow-up motion to add to this. Also, I just want to add that Saturday, Mr. Paul Rex was not at home enjoying the sunshine by the pool, he was out with many of our Reseda residents, neighborhood council, Reseda High School. They had a graffiti town hall meeting. We had representatives from Public Works, representatives from the Chief Moore was there, along with representatives from the LAPD. Rafi, the deputy city attorney, neighborhood prosecutor, was there on the Saturday afternoon, this past Saturday. The whole focus on graffiti abatement and how the community is fed up with it and how they're banding together. So I think as we see more communities get involved in this, to say they want to see it stop, they want to link up with everyone else in the system. But it was the first time I know of where they actually had a neighborhood council meeting strictly focused on graffiti, the problems, the abatement, and how we can all work together to get it done. So we used the Public Works with what they did. They talked about the vine program, follow-up, people ask questions, how they can get vines to cover walls, which obviously eliminates the graffiti. But it seems that the tolerance level has gone beyond the boiling point. And I can remember years ago where they had a murder in Westwood Village of a young student, and the people went ballistic. People set a certain level of quality of life, unhappiness, dissatisfaction, violence, etc., and then it blows. And I think what's happening with graffiti, at least in the valley parts, people have had it, and they want to, before they go to vigilante justice, which we're not advocating, they band together with the system to help make it happen. I know Jody's been, Ms. Galvin has been very, very focused on that. We're looking to tracking systems, you name it, and we're pulling out all the stakes to do something. And it's not thousands of people doing it, it's a few people who are doing it. We call them thugs, we call them all kinds of things at that meeting. Remember, Paul, when Chief Moore got up, he threw them all together. But the bottom line is, and I commend the City Attorney's Office for bringing this about, this package that I think will have movement to make the difference. And while we don't have millions to put into the program, we've got communities that are now saying, we've had enough, we want to see the change. And maybe we could hear from the Public Works Beautification, what you folks are going to do on it. Paul?
Yes, good morning. Paul Roch, Director of the Office of Community Beautification with the Board of Public Works. We do manage the primary graffiti abatement program in the city of Los Angeles. Some of the areas that Councilmember Parks mentioned that we do not do is in the park facilities and also on city-owned buildings that are maintained by General Services. So those are, I think, areas that we could look at. I mean, we do have graffiti crews that are on the streets basically 7 days a week. In a lot of cases, driving by graffiti on the side of a library or a rec and park building that they could stop by and do abatement on. Basically, just part of their regular duties as going through. And I think we could definitely look at saving the city some dollars. I don't know if either GSD or Rec and Parks has a specific graffiti abatement line budget item. I think they're kind of lumped in the general maintenance budgets. But again, you know, I mean, all it would really take for us is to have some of the matching paint that's utilized by those two departments, and we could certainly have our crews stop by. We did remove 31.7 million square feet of graffiti last year. That's over the past 2 years about a 20% increase in the amount of graffiti that's being removed on a citywide basis. So it's a huge problem. The number of calls going into 311 have gone up almost double in the past 2 years as well. I think as people come to depend on the city to go out there and remove graffiti and become aware of it, and as they see graffiti problems increasing. So again, we're supportive of these new issues coming forward.
Let me just say, I think that the way things are going, and people will not be fighting over work because everybody's workload, everybody's resources are going to be reduced. We're just looking at the issue of what people call about. And the thing is no one that I found get excited whether they believe General Services does the paint out or whether you do the paint out. They just want to see it gone. And so we want to make sure that if you're out there 7 days a week and can provide the service, that we get the service done. And as those other departments, and they say whatever their standards are, make you aware of it. And so what I want to do on this ordinance is certainly want to approve it because you put a lot of work into it, but I'd like to add a direction that we ask the CLA-CAO and the Board of Public Works, General Services, and Rec and Park to get together and create what we need is a response on graffiti to reduce these department concerns so that we have one-stop shopping, just like 311 in the city, that we got one group that are doing graffiti. So we've had that as a direction. The second direction, I'd ask the CLA, CAO, and the city attorney to get together and create that expanded parenting, I guess we call intervention and prevention program that is mentioned in this ordinance.
Yeah, I know, about 3 years ago, we did a pilot program with Rec and Parks where we had our crews doing abatement in Rec and Parks facilities for about 6 months, and towards the end, they were not receptive of our crews going in and doing the abatement. I think there were a lot of reasons, you know.
But we need to work those reasons out. You know, it took us 3 years to get the what was that, the home secure and the whatever program to decide they could all be done by one department. Right. Finally, housing department does them all. So
ultimately, if people do call 311, say for graffiti in a Rec and Park facility, even if it comes to us, we do refer it to them. I think the issue is we have crews that are out there and can remove it usually within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes it takes Rec and Park a week or two to get a crew out there.
I think what the greatest confusion that we have in my community is when we start trying to educate people of the 7 different departments to do the same thing. Right. And they really don't care. They just want it gone. They see it on their library. To tell them that library does it different than Rec and Park, and all that.
And that's not even taking into account Caltrans, the school district, and MTA.
We could have
that
one
also.
response by the city. That's what we hope we could work out.
Okay, so with that as the order, we'll move it forward and appreciate the work. Mr. Austin, Mr. Reardon, and everyone who's worked with you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
For the leadership of all 3 members of the council, the committee, by pushing. We're glad we were able to bring you something, and we appreciate the fact that you pushed for this, all 3 of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Reardon, there are now 2 typos actually you need to find. There are 2.
Well, now I'm
challenge for you
extra
there.
careful on all
Communications, yes.
communications to this.
Okay. Item 7, please, Mr. White.
Before we move on, item 5 and 6, the ordinance is to include Mr. Parks' amendment regarding the funding use of funds. Mr. Parks?
We just want to add that one phrase and how the funds were used.
Sure.
To add that they also can be used for the city's abatement process or graffiti removal process.
And your 2 other report back requests.
Report backs, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. White, next item, please.
Yes, sir. Item 7, City Attorney and CEO reports relative to a grant award in the amount of $100,000 from the California Emergency Management Agency for the City Attorney's Project Safe Neighborhoods Anti-Gang Initiative.
Mr. Parks?
Yes, let me just, I just have one thing I'd like to just ask the direction on this grant, that number 1, that we ask that the city attorney, if they seek this grant in the future, that they reduce or eliminate general fund impact, both salary and benefit, and that they accept the grant on the basis that they will work within only the expenditures allocated in the grant, so that we're not expanding the grant beyond what we're getting. And then, because one of the things, I think this is a department that has somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million deficit for this year, and so we wanted to restrain these additional costs.
Yeah, I do know, Ida Rubio with the City Administrative Office, I do know that the department is working diligently to try and reduce their salary deficit that they have right now.
I know everyone is, but I think last time we had a meeting, theirs was still somewhere in that $2 to $3 million.
It's been reduced somewhat.
But that's all, we would just like to have that instruction for next year's grant, that they stay within the confines of the grant, and that we not expand it beyond what the grant guidelines are.
Right, and I think one of the things also is that last year the position was a DCA 2 for year 2, and it looks like the person may have had a step increase and has been promoted to a DCA 3. So that may be why there has been a slight increase in the salary expenditures.
Understood.
All right, so is that, with that request, we can move item 7 forward, everybody? All right.
Mr. Weiss, we approved the other items on consent. I know they were pulled back, but I have a meeting at 12.
Okay, hold on a second. So your other questions were on 8 and 9, Mr. Parks?
Yes, I had a
I'd
question.
like to just get these out.
Okay.
Can you make the questions really brief so that we can let Mr. Zine go?
I can do them very quickly. On number 8, we just would like to, we waived this because we were told that there was no
That's correct.
general fund impact, and it appears from the notes that there may be one, and we'd just like a report back if it ever got resolved.
Report back from,
Whether this installation cost ever got resolved, because it's still hanging.
report to council from whom?
Yeah, if we can get it by the time it comes to council.
Okay, from the mayor's office?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can say to that at this moment?
I'm going to look at the CAO in terms
I believe the $53,000 for the GS, sorry, Melissa Fleming with the CAO.
Yeah.
Are you referring to the
Yeah.
$53,000? The purchase of radios for GST, we were seeing there
For the
was a
installation
$53,000 installation cost that had yet to be identified what the funding source for that was.
right. That was a
Your name,
conversation.
Laura?
Laura Shin, Grants Director for the Mayor's Office. We're still looking to identify funds for that, but those would be potential grant funds. There would be no general. We weren't looking for general fund dollars.
Okay, that needs to be, if that's not clear, at least.
We can add
can
that
clarify
on.
that?
Sure.
All right, well, so with that, we'll approve the item. And the final item you had questions on was number 9?
Yeah, the other one was on the fire department. At the last budget meeting, they were again $2 to $3 million over budget, and I'd just like to get a clarification of, with that overage, how they found the $77,000 to do this. Is this adding to the deficit, or is it money that wasn't considered before?
Mark Davis with the CAO's office. These are not general funds. This is from the WET fund. This is state grant fund money that they are going to use towards this.
Okay, but it says there's a 20% match.
Right.
And they say they're finding the match in their training budget.
Well, this is not from the general fund training budget. This is from the VET funds
Okay,
that
so-
they get from the state. That
WE what?
That's VET. That's Vocational Educational Training Fund.
Okay, so these are grant funds that are the matching funds?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so does that clarify that?
Mhm.
All right, so that item is approved as well. That's the last item on the agenda, correct? Mr.
It is,
White?
sir.
There are no hands, no cards, no more. Thank you, everybody.